Cool. Microphone. Right. Life is good.
Hello.
Hey, you missed my my intro before. Of course, maybe I'm just too old for you, and you're too young to remember it. But I came out with "There's nothing to fear. Tunnel Lord is here."
Oh, see, I didn't hear. No,
Oh boy, how you doing, man?
doing good. I was gonna change my name to Mr. T and have a goofy profile picture, but
You're still rocking the president-elect deal, huh?
am I? I can't tell.
It still says Tunnel Lord 1337, president-elect.
Yeah, I guess I am.
Let's see. Says we are online, waiting for people to join.
So, what do you think they're gonna do? You think they're gonna go fully force vaccines? I mean, there's been a few uptick in rhetoric like that. So, I mean,
Yeah,
Fauci said that just recently. Actually, he said there should be more mandates at the local level.
I haven't heard that one yet, but I haven't gone through my news feeds yet today. So, I think they've been floating trial balloons, seeing how far they can push. In fact, I've got a meeting with my sheriff tomorrow because I want to talk to him about the door-to-door stuff and what happens if they go full vaccine. What forced vaccine? What are you gonna do, sir?
I need to call my sheriff, see what's up.
Do I still have that? Maybe I should bring that up and show people. That's not it. No, I must have closed it. Where did I put it? Oh, I got it right here. And a constitutional evening to you, Tyler. Mr. Whaley. I don't believe I've seen you before. It's nice to meet you. I'm glad to see some new faces. New faces are good. We will be kicking off quite shortly. Da-dum. Well, let's see. It is 7:00. Little bit of a light crowd getting started. I hope that will pick up. I've been inviting people. Of course, I don't know how many people are actually watching yet, because even though I'm getting comments through YouTube, YouTube says I have nobody watching. So there's magic going. All right, well, listen, let's get started. Hello there, everyday Americans. Welcome. We're here at the Constitution Study. We're at the live Q&A. We're here to answer some questions. I imagine a lot of people have questions, And I think it's a great opportunity for us to get together and share some ideas, share some questions, maybe some follow-ups, and take it from there. Now, it right now it looks like I've got a fairly light attendance. I don't know, maybe it's the day. Plug my phone in so the battery doesn't die on me. Who knows? You know, it's always a little strange, but we'll take it from here. So I've already got Tyler's asking what's on the stream for today. Well, most of the stream is about answering your questions, but I usually like to bring something to kind of get the party started. So I want to start by sharing this. Does everybody see that? I found this from a lady by the name of Chris Ann Hall. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with her or not. She is a constitutional lawyer. She's based out of Florida. I do listen to her podcast. Yeah, some good, some bad, like most places, but she had an interesting discussion. Being a lawyer, she actually wrote up a no trespass sign. And this all gets to this nonsense of President Biden wanting to send people door to door to pester you to take the experimental shot, to be the human trial, the guinea pig. Now, I like this sign with one change. If I'm making this sign, I'm saying a valid warrant consistent with state and federal constitution. Just saying, it's kind of, the U.S. Constitution is still the supreme law of the land, so it has to meet with that. I am actually meeting with my sheriff tomorrow, and one of the things I'm discussing with him are these no trespassing ideas and what his plans are around the door-to-door pestering, the potential of a vaccine mandate, any state issues that may come along. What's he going to do? I've talked to him before, so he knows what I expect of him. I want to deal with some specifics. I also want to say thank you. I don't have it with me. I got a chance to meet Sheriff Mack. If you don't know, Sheriff Mack was the Arizona sheriff that stood up to the Clinton administration that tried to basically get the sheriffs to be their police force for them or put them in jail if they refused. He took it to the Supreme Court. He won. I got to meet him. I'm actually trying to get an interview with him that I can put on the radio program because I think that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, that'd be a good interview. Yeah, definitely.
Yep. He's excited. Right now, we're just working on schedules. So if you listen to the radio program, hopefully in the near future, that will be coming up. Just, you know, there's actually, I forgot to mention, there's a second part to this. And this is the part that I mean, we've all seen no trespassing signs, right? Mrs. Hall, I believe she goes by, actually created a form that you can have by your door ready to fill out in hand. Any government or other person that wishes to pester you at your door, and it lays out the law and little reminders in here like, hey, demanding a copy of the warrant does not relieve you of your rights. Demanding the agent or assignee leave your property does not waive your rights. This actually got me to go and actually look up Tennessee state trespass law. So I know specifically what the laws are. So, you know, this is kind of cool. And I like this because on this is a form where you can actually record the incident of trespass so you can file charges. So you can file a complaint against the trespasser. So this got me thinking about trespass law and government busybodies and all of that. So I figured that would be an interesting place to start this evening's discussion. I see Sean has joined. How you doing, Sean? What do people think? when we're talking about uh, um, these the door to door knockers and the potential now. I mean, well, let's see. LA has gone back to a mask mandate. Australia is now officially a prison colony. I know that's not the United States. They don't have our same constitution, but they've been trying to institute Australian style gun confiscation in America. If this works in Australia, do you think they're not going to try and bring it here? What do you think?
Well, I mean, that's the natural state of all tyrants. They must constantly remove your rights. So yeah, I mean, they're gonna try it, but I don't. They're gonna have to have a reason to try it. There'll have to be something that happens to give them a reason. I don't know.
But we have the reason. And by the way, for those of you online, I don't know exactly how many people are online because it never tells me. Remember, if you're not in the Zoom room, you can still ask questions. Just put them in the comments. I should see them, and we'll work them into the conversation. But they have the excuse. The excuse is the Delta variant. How many? Let me ask you this, as a thought experiment. Show of hands. How many of you have heard a report about the spike in cases due to the Delta variant? Right? How many of you have heard of the death rate from the Delta variant? Yeah. That's my point. Right? They're using the Delta variant is the big scary boogeyman. And it's the same. Even the news report I've heard out of Australia said of the 82,000 tests that they've done, they came up with something like 168 or 170. It was like a couple of hundred Delta variant cases. 82,000, a few hundred. And for that, they're shutting stores down. They are shutting businesses down. They are actually shutting down neighborhoods. They're gonna bar people from leaving their neighborhood. And unless there's like a short list of businesses that they'll allow open so that people can live. But now you live in a prison. If you live in Australia, you live in a prison colony. And I know of no other way to describe it than a prison colony. And again, if it works in Australia, do you really think, if not the nationally, you're not going to have LA, Portland, Seattle, Chicago, New York, Washington D.C. has basically been under martial law for 7.5 months. Do you really think they're not going to suddenly say you're all locked down, you can't come out because the big scary Delta variant is out?
So I'm not sure about everybody else. Where I live in small town Wyoming. So pretty much nobody here really cared about the coronavirus. There was a handful of people who were really afraid of it. They always wore their mask, yelled at people for not wearing a mask. But for the most part, it didn't really affect anybody. I had some issues with the draconian garbage that our governor was putting out, shutting down bars, restaurants, all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, Wyoming really didn't respond to coronavirus very well. I don't imagine any variants they'll respond to very well either.
Yeah, and again, I live in small town Tennessee, and it was the same thing. It's funny. Walmart and Kroger all had all these stores in the town I live near. All these stores still have signs that masks are required, and nobody wears them. The only thing that Walmart did, all the Walmart employees wear masks. All of the grocery store finally stopped making people wear masks. All Walmart actually did was make you stand 6 feet apart in line to get in. They limited the number of people in the store, so you stood in line 6 feet apart. The funny part was I had somebody over. What they were working? On the phone system. So my internet's DSL, and every so often they just need to replace the router. It's like I don't know where they're getting they're probably getting them out of China. It seems like every so often I got to reboot it, and every so often I call them up and they just replace it, and it's that's my burden to bear. But the guy shows up at the front door with a mask. I said, "You don't have to wear that in here." He says, "I do." He says, "Well, what he said was, if someone from the company comes by and sees me not wearing it, I'll be fired." I said, "I'm sorry to hear that you work for such a stupid company." But then again, that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to get rid of them. I don't have really a problem with the company except for the stupid mask stuff. It's just where I live, services is, DSL service is not great. And I'm apparently not where they're bringing in fiber. So I'm stuck. But so that I'll open the floor. Any other questions that are coming out? I've told you what I'm doing. I'm meeting with the sheriff tomorrow to talk about trespass and mandates and constitutions and whatnot. I've got first of all, well, does anybody on Zoom have a question you want to ask before I go down a tangent?
Yeah, I actually do.
Okay.
My
And I'm still
question.
leaving it open on YouTube and Periscope. Type in your questions. We'll give them a shot here.
Okay, so we know in the U.S. Constitution it says that the executive. It doesn't say anywhere that the executive branch can make laws, and that Article 1, Section 1 is all legislative power shall be in one Congress. All legislative power should be in one Congress.
Mhm.
So we know that the president has no lawmaking power at all. But I kind of had the question about, well, what about states? Now, in my constitution, it explicitly says sort of the same thing, that no branch can practice a power that has not been given to them, explicitly given to them within this constitution out here in Idaho. So that it has that going for us. But I'm like, other states. What if a state said, "Oh, wait, the governor can make a law for whatever reason"? Would that be legal? Like, I mean, because the executive branch, by the definition, just means to make or to enforce laws, not really to make laws. So I don't.
Well, yeah. Again, the purpose of the executive branch, you're right, is to execute the law. It really comes down to your state constitution. Remember, your state government was created by a constitution. Same way the federal government was created by a constitution. The people's consent was codified in that constitution. If the Idaho Constitution says that either in these situations or under these conditions, a governor has the power to enact legislation, regulation, whatever, that is a function of the state, as long as a power that they're exercising is not one that has been delegated to the United States. That's why it's very important to look at. I've talked about this before, to understand the emergency powers clause in your state's constitution. How much power and under what conditions can be given to the governor? For example, was it Tennessee? There was one state I was looking at, and it's very specific. I found it very interesting. Most of them are very specific in that the governor is allowed to enact regulations that impact state organizations, right? And you find it and you read it and it's like, oh, one state was like, yes, the governor can enact if the governor declares a state of emergency, he or she can enact regulations that involve the health department, or that involves county health departments, right? This is the governor telling the county health departments, here's what you can do. But when you look at what many governors actually did, you find out not even their state constitution said, no, your emergency powers don't grant you that. They just ignore it because, well, let's face it, most of us don't know what our constitutions say, so we ignore it. Let's see. Tyler's out here. Honestly, I understand the reprehension of all the extreme lockdown stuff, but I never really felt too strongly about the more responsible stuff, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. Tyler, can you expand on that a little bit? What are you talking about when you're talking about extreme lockdown versus reasonable stuff? Because I could see that being a couple of different things, and I don't want to I don't want to infer words that you're not meaning what I'm thinking.
I don't know what I said. Yeah, interesting about our state constitution, it doesn't give him any sort of power that that I found yet, at least
Okay.
in emergency situations. It's within Idaho code, but it's not made in, that's not parallel with the Idaho Constitution, so it's null and void. So I mean, yeah, I was just thinking about other people in other states. Like what would happen to them? Would that be legal? That was my question. I was just curious about that.
Yeah, it's understanding the one of the things that the Supreme Court is really, really bad at. Trust me, it's silly season. I've been picking on the Supreme Court like a nose. I mean, it's just been. I'm calling them. I just did an article on the latest abuse of Obamacare. So I'm still working on the edits. I'm still ripe on that. But this idea of dual sovereignty is really misrepresented. Now, there is a sense of dual sovereignty, but they're not actually the way it's described, right? You have instead of state, the 10th Amendment says you've got powers. The states delegated some of their powers to the United States. Any powers they didn't specifically delegate in the Constitution remain with the states. While we do submit to it, and I forget what Madison wrote about dual sovereignty, those sovereignties are not in overlapping spheres. So I can think of, with the exception of alcohol, which we specifically added in the 20th Amendment when we 21st when we rescinded.
18th was the prohibition,
right? 21st was repeal. When we repealed it, we left the regulation at the federal level intact. Right? But other than that, there is no law which should be in both state and federal court. Murder is not a federal crime. So there's one guy I listen to. He talks. He's on a gun podcast, and he's always his solution to he talks a lot about recidivism, and you see people who they commit a crime, and a serious crime, and then you find out they've been in and out of jail and getting slaps on the wrist for years, sometimes decades. And his solution is, if you make it you charge them in federal court. Well, there's a problem. That power was not delegated to the federal government. So you're actually making the problem worse, not better. But there's understanding that with the exception of alcohol regulations, something cannot be both a state and federal crime. And the worst abuse of that is when the federal court, the U.S. courts have said that if you are charged in a state court and found not guilty, you can then be charged in a federal court for the same crime, for the same offense, because it's a separate sovereign. Yeah, but you're exercising a power that's not legitimately within the United States, first off. And second of all, it's not the same crime, it's the same offense. So you're telling me that that if I commit if I commit embezzlement, pick something innocuous, right? If I commit embezzlement, I'm actually committing two offenses, one state, one federal. I don't think so. So I was just looking real quick at the Idaho. Yeah, I'd have to look a little closer. I don't see. I was taking a quick look at the Idaho, the Idaho Constitution, see if I can quickly find anything about emergency powers. Okay, Tyler's asking, is unreasonable is the continuous lockdowns and massive regulations of the private enterprise. Okay, so if I understand Tyler, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're basically saying, listen, when this all started and we didn't know much about COVID, it was okay for states and cities, and at some point, possibly even the federal government, to lock things down because we had to keep people safe. I hate to say this, but that's wrong. It's actually illegal for states and cities and counties and the federal government to deprive you of your liberty, of control of your body, which is considered property, without due process of law, a process that protects the rights of the individual. Now, interesting enough, one of the, when this all started in 2020, mostly what the federal government did directly to the people was recommend, right? You had the CDC making recommendations left, right, and center. All the counties and cities and states were following it, whether it made sense or not. The federal government then spent billions of dollars developing a vaccine, which was illegal. Now they control the vaccine, which is illegal. Now they're starting to extort people to take the vaccine, which is illegal. And now the president wants to send people door to door to harass you to take the vaccine, which is illegal.
Next step is literally dragging you to the hospital to plunge a needle in your arm.
Which, according to Alan Dershowitz, the government has the authority to do.
I heard that.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
Now,
I remember that.
Alan Dershowitz, there's a lot of things that I agree with him on, but I'm sorry that I wrote an article about that. That was by far the dumbest thing I had heard in a decade. And the best part, the very best part of the interview was after he said that the state had the right to drag you to the hospital and plunge a needle in your arm. He was asked if he and his family would take it. And he said, well, if I thought it was effective. So you're an ignorant hypocrite. You're a fool. He's been educated into imbecility. There's no better way to describe it. So Tyler, rights don't exist only after a certain time. And I want to make this point, whether or not you think it's reasonable to stay home is not the question. The question is, do state, local, and federal governments have the legal authority to force you to do these things, to deprive you of your liberty, to deprive you of your property, both in your control of your body, control of your business, control of your of even the land you may be on? The answer is no, they don't have that legal authority to force you until they can show you are a danger to others. They can show they have probable cause supported by oath or affirmation that you are an actual danger. So if, for example, let's take COVID off the picture, right? Because I'm drawing a blank on the name. There's a case from Boston back in the 1800s where a ship had a smallpox outbreak. And the question was, could a U.S. citizen be held in quarantine because he had been exposed to smallpox? Well, there you have probable cause that he can be a danger to others. And the court said, yes. You have. I don't remember the details of how the court came to that. Courts often come to the right answers with some really bad law. But the idea was, yes, I can show in a court of law a probable cause that he may be dangerous, so we want to quarantine him to protect, so that he doesn't injure others. That is a lot different than quarantining people without any evidence or any probable cause that they are a danger.
It would also have to be an individual case by case basis. So if they wanted to quarantine you, you'd have to have your own warrant, basically, to seize you. I'd have to have my own warrant to seize me. Donald Lord would have to have his own. The governor can't just drop something down and say, everybody's quarantined, you're not allowed to leave.
Exactly.
It's not an umbrella that you can drop on people.
Exactly. And it's that way for a reason. What was I looking at the other day dealing with general warrants? I'm drawing a blank. something got me thinking about the general warrants and this idea that, judges used to issue a warrant, basically a blank warrant. So yeah, go search this guy's house, his farm, whatever. When you find something, fill in the warrant. That's why we have a Fourth Amendment, is to prevent governments from doing effectively that. So
How could they even? I'd never heard about that. How could they even get away with that? The Fourth Amendment clearly says that describing specifically the things to be searched or things to be seized.
Well, this was before the Fourth Amendment. This is the British in the colonies.
Gotcha.
That's why we have a Fourth Amendment, is that they were using these techniques. So so hopefully, Tyler, that answered what you're talking about. And again, for those of you on the broadcast, looks like I got a couple. Of course, one of them's probably Tunnel Lord. Please join. Please ask questions. This is an open forum, and we work best when we got a lot of questions. Christopher has joined. Hello, Christopher.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you this evening?
Good.
Anybody got a question? I feel like an old Star Trek episode. Since before your sun burned hot in the space, I've been waiting for a question. Yes, I watched too much Star Trek as a kid. I am old enough to have watched it in its first run, not reruns. How's that for scary? No questions yet. All right, well, I got one. I'm working on a meme. Now, I'm not a great meme guy. I have it in my head. I'm really bad at getting it down in something I can share. I heard this line, and I'm trying to turn it into a meme. Why did the mouse get caught in the trap? Because it didn't understand why the cheese was free. I want a meme of a mouse coming up to a trap. Right? Why did it get caught in that? It didn't, and when it click, it didn't understand why the cheese was free. Think about all the free stuff people are being offered. We don't know why they're offering it for free, but that mousetrap's going to close on us. It's like it kind of ties with what we have been talking about going on in Australia. So what else?
In Australia, this is all hearsay from a video game that I play. I played with some people from Australia. They were saying that the Australian government basically shut everything down and started giving people, I think it was like $2,000 a month is what he said. I was like, that's outrageous. How could you possibly sustain giving your population $2,000 a month until they deem it safe to go back to work?
Listen, if you're looking for rational, politics is not the place to look for it. It's there has always been a thought. It's what drove. It's where Marx got his idea. It's where Engels got his idea. I am saddened that my name is so close to his, one letter different. That this utopianist idea that if we give people money, they will magically produce stuff. If you just give you money, what was Biden's latest one? If we just give people money, it'll drive down inflation. Contrary to all monetary theory, somehow, if you just give people money, they will voluntarily work to produce stuff. It's never worked. Show me one example of a both socialist and prosperous nation ever. They don't exist. It's that, it sounds great. It sounds great. Wouldn't you love it if you could sit back, get a check from the government every month, and then only work on what you want to work on? Sounds great. It just doesn't work. Because sooner or later, people are going to realize what I'm working on. I don't have to work on anything productive. Therefore, the government's got to get their money somewhere, and they just print it and make a mess. So, yeah, it's. But it's a theory. It just keeps, you again, educated into imbecility. There's actually, let me rephrase that a little bit, because it kind of relates to an article that I got coming out. I think it's either next week or the week after. We have this belief. We have been trained, at least the younger generation have been trained, that if you believe it, if you feel it, it is true. Right? Transgenderism is all, if you feel it, that is fact, that is true. That somehow your opinions, your feelings, you have your truth, I have my truth. Two diametrically opposed positions can both be true at the same time. All right, but people are living as if that were true. So take, for example, Venezuela, the wealthiest nation in South America at one point, a quite prosperous nation, a very powerful nation. Some people succumb to greed, right? Yet a guy comes along and says, look at all those greedy rich people. That's you. You should have that. That's yours. And I'll take it from them and give it to you. And greedy people said, great, give me free stuff. There's some cheese. Give me free cheese. That's what I want. And in a few years, it went from one of the most prosperous nations, one of the freest nations in South America, to one of the poorest nations in South America, where they were eating their pets because the cheese wasn't free. All it cost them was everything that made them prosperous. And it's the willingness to assume that just because I think it is true, it must be true. I mean, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the poster child for, if I think it, it must be true. Of course, she's also the poster child for, better to keep your mouth shut and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and prove it. So, again, a lot of people think this, but it's like they're playing checkers, but the world is playing chess. Right? You play checkers, you think one move ahead, you're fine, right? It doesn't, if you're playing checkers with a 5-year-old, you think one move ahead, you're fine. But the world doesn't work that way. You have to think what's the second, third, fourth order effect of what you're doing, and they refuse to. So we end up stuck with this nonsense. Okay, I got a couple questions. Incredible Paul is here. He wants to know, what about the state health department power, and how does fire code limiting number of people relate to constitutional power? Okay. The first thing I have to understand is health departments are state health departments are part of the state government. Therefore, they're controlled by the state constitution. So the existence and power of a state health department is defined by that state's constitution. You have to look at the state constitution. What is that power? It has absolutely nothing to do with the federal government, with the federal U.S. Constitution, unless they're going in and attempting to search and seize without a warrant. If they are depriving you of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, stuff like that. For the most part, the powers of a state health department are defined by that state's constitution. Now, fire codes, I want to think about that for a little bit. So again, fire regulations, safety regulations are not a federal issue. They're a state issue. So the first place you want to look is state constitution. Now, the real question comes, is the fire code depriving you of liberty or your property? So, and again, that is going to become a bit more of a judgment call. For example, let's say you have a building, you have a meeting space, And let's say that you can comfortably fit 100 people in that meeting space. And I mean comfortably. I don't mean that you're packed in like sardines and no one can move and no one can breathe. 100 people show up. They can be, they can be talking and chatting and having drinks and snacks and whatever. Life is good. The fire department comes in and says, we don't think that is safe. Really, you should be at 80 people. Okay, you think 100's okay. They think 80's okay. How did they get to that process? How did they come to that number? Was that an arbitrary decision? Or did someone sit down and write a law and consider the due process, consider the owner's rights to determine what is the maximum capacity that a space can hold, right? Did they, in other words, that's the big question. Did they follow a process that protected the owner's rights? If they did not, or if their process is so egregious, like you got room for 100, they say, no, you can only have 20. That's a violation of your rights because they've it's not a reasonable restriction. Right? So part of it's going to be look at your state constitution. What does the state constitution say about the power of the fire department to establish occupancy codes? And then the question is, does that process they use follow due process? The Free Legal Dictionary defines due process as a judicial or governmental process that protects the rights of the individual. So that's why it says it's not really a one size fits all, but it always remains at the state level. And if the state is depriving you of your property without due process, that's a 14th Amendment issue, but it really should start at the state level. Hopefully, Incredible, that makes sense. Okay, we've got
what if like no power, or what if such departments were never described in the state constitution? Would they have the same amount of power, or I don't think they would.
Well, again, your state government is a delegated authority. They exist under a charter that's called the state constitution. If there is not a reasonable execution of that power described in the Constitution, for example, does the Constitution say the fire departments will, each county will have a fire department and will establish laws and whatnot for establishing fire codes or occupancy limits? It doesn't necessarily need to be that detailed. If the Constitution delegates either to the state or sometimes to a more local entity, the duty of maintaining fire safety or other codes, that's the question. That's why I said you have to get into the state's constitution. It'd be nice if there's one simple catch-all answer, but it's not the case. Each state is going to be different. And then it's the importance of understanding the Constitution when you go back to the state constitution. If you argue that this fire code is unreasonable, the same way.
I've read Wyoming state constitution, or at least as much of it as I could, and compared to reading the United States Constitution, it is a lot more difficult to comprehend what's in the state constitution. There's so much more. There's so many. This power's delegated to certain municipalities. This is restricted to the county level. This is restricted to the state level, and it gets really jumbled really quickly in state constitution.
This is true, but that doesn't change the fact. So let's face it, states have legitimately much more power than the federal government. Therefore, they need some more details of how they're, so that's why. And since most state constitutions were actually written by lawyers, they're written in legalese, not in English, which makes it more difficult as well. I know when I lived in New York, I tried to read the New York State Constitution, and it just gave me headaches. It was awful. It was. Okay, let's see. Tyler's back. He says, I want to know what is unconstitutional about Obamacare. Good question. The answer is very simple. Nowhere in the Constitution is the United States delegated the authority to regulate health care or health insurance. So the federal government does not have the legal authority to regulate health care or health insurance unless it is across state lines, interstate commerce, in which case they can make it regular between the states. So you may, they may be able to say, listen, if you have, let's say you run an ambulance service, right? And your standard fee for picking up and transporting someone to the hospital is $50 plus 20 cents a mile. That's what you charge for an ambulance service. Now, let's say you're a company and you let's say either you're on the border of a state. So I'm here in Tennessee. In Tennessee, they charge me, $50.20 a mile. In Kentucky, they charge me $30.20 a mile. The federal government can say we need to be regular in interstate commerce. If you're transiting commerce, you have to have one rate when you cross state lines. You can't, charge me different rates. That would be legitimate, but that's not what Obamacare does. Obamacare says that they determine, among other things, what is the minimum amount of health care you must cover as an individual. They have no legal authority to do that. They fine you, or as the Supreme Court likes to say, tax you if you fail to comply. Well, okay, the first part's void anyway, because that's not a power of the federal government, but the Supreme Court is full of educated idiots. So they're fining you for something you did not do. Nowhere in the Constitution is the federal government allowed to do that. In fact, they are allowed to collect taxes, excises, duties that are uniform across but direct taxes have to be apportioned to the states except on income. So you have, they don't have the authority to regulate insurance. They don't have the authority to set up exchanges. They don't have the authority to fine you if you decide you don't want to have insurance. Can we go on? All right. Those are just a few of the favorite things. And the Supreme Court, and again, it's fresh on my mind because I just wrote an article about this, has worked very hard pulling the rabbit out of trying to save Obamacare from its obvious constitutional delinquencies. They basically lie and make up stuff to make it happen.
I would recommend going back and researching the Stamp Act and the Boston Tea Party and what that was about. And that's why Obamacare is illegal. It's one of the things that we were expressly trying to avoid with the United States Constitution. The fact that the government can tell you to buy a product, whether you want it or not, is a violation of your liberty and property. Because they're taking your money, which is your property, and forcing you to do it against your will, which is a violation of your liberty. The Stamp Act, basically, whether or not you wanted the paper, you had to buy paper. And then they sent tea over and said, well, you have to buy this tea. You're not allowed to buy it from anywhere else. We're like, we don't want your tea. And so they dumped it in the harbor.
Yeah. The quickest answer is nowhere in the Constitution is the federal government authorized to deal with health insurance, period. So unless there's interstate commerce involved, in other words, they could regulate an insurance company that crosses state lines, right? They could say when you are doing commerce across state lines, you have to meet certain standards. That is it. Everything else, they have no authority and all that. And incredible, no, actually, if you read it, it's the Supreme Court that called it a tax. So the law, when they were negotiating Obamacare, when they wrote Obamacare, they were adamant. This is not a tax. This is a fine. It is a punishment for a lack of action. The Supreme Court, in fact, specifically Chief Justice Roberts, when they wrote the opinion of NFIB versus Amelia, said, well, you could call it a tax and it would fall under the Congress's taxing authority, except Congress's taxing authority, which is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, says, yes, Congress can collect taxes, duties, excises, and imposts. An Obamacare fine is none of those. Right? It's not a tax. They called it a tax on someone who didn't do something. Right? That's irrational. But okay, so it's a tax. Oh, by the way, it's a tax directly on the people. Therefore, since it's not on your income, it has to be apportioned to the states. Oh, but that doesn't make any rational sense because they're literally taxing you directly. But again, the Supreme Court bent themselves into knots trying to find a way to save this abomination of liberty, this blatantly unconstitutional, and they're still doing it. They declined to hear a case, California v. Texas, where Texas and about a dozen other states said, listen, you said the individual mandate was constitutional because it came under the taxing authority. Okay, they ignored the fact that that's baloney. They said now that Congress has zeroed out the fine, all the paperwork you're making us do to enforce a law that's unenforceable is unconstitutional. The states said, you're asking us to go through all this expense of paperwork and regulation to enforce a law that's unenforceable. That's unconstitutional. Of course, it's nah, you don't have standing. Now, it really honked me off, and my closing in this article is, yes, the states have standing. The states created the federal government. The states established the boundaries of its power when they ratified the Constitution and all 27 amendments. The states ultimately have standing to rein in and control not only the United States, including, by the way, the Supreme Court. So if I were ruling Texas, if I were in charge, I'd simply say, no, ignore it. We're not going to follow it anymore because it is void. It is a violation of the Constitution. And just because the Supreme Court, our creation, refused to give us an opinion on it, we don't care. You now have at least 13 to 15 states that are saying this is a violation of the compact, and let them and let the states fight it out. So,
isn't that what people are mad at New York for? Because isn't Cuomo saying something about ignoring certain things that he doesn't like because, well, he doesn't like them?
Is it any different? How many states have said we're not going to deal with immigration? We're not going to deal with. We're going to legalize marijuana in contravention to the United States, and we're going to protect the Second Amendment in contravention of a federal edict. All right. Incredible. Fire code doesn't deprive someone of the right to peacefully assemble. It limits its size. And the big issue, here's the issue with also, the right to peaceably assemble that it would be violating is not in the U.S. Constitution. It would be in the state constitution. And the question is, did the people of the state give the state the authority to control fires, especially in population centers? That's really what fire codes are about, right? The idea is if you pack too many people into a building, there's no safe way for them to evacuate in case of a fire. That's why they put limitations on it. Now, you can peaceably assemble. They're regulating the size. They're not denying you. They're regulating the size of the assembly. So but again, it's not a First Amendment issue because the First Amendment starts out, Congress shall make no law. Fire codes are not a law of Congress. So it's not the First Amendment. It's still in your state constitution. Okay, let's see. Florida man, Mississippi officially asking the court to overturn Roe v. Wade under the 10th Amendment. I haven't heard that. That's interesting. I since I've read the Constitution, I understand, and I've read many of our founding fathers. I understand that courts don't offer laws; they offer opinion. Roe v. Wade is an opinion. It's a terrible opinion. It's a bad. Actually, the Roe v. Wade opinion is not really the bad opinion. It's really not all that bad, especially when you look at the understanding at the time. Roe v. Wade did not say abortion anytime for any reason. Roe v. Wade says, and I've actually done an article, look for it on the website. The abortion decision is considered private communication between the patient and the doctor. Not that decision is not subject to government intervention. However, as the fetus develops, as the what I would call the child develops, it becomes a time when it is considered, when it would be a state purview to regulate that, to protect the health of the child in the womb. The problem that the court had, and they admitted it, is we don't know when that is, which is why all of these heartbeat bills, fetal pain bills, actually are following Roe v. Wade. They're saying, listen, we now, 50 years later, have scientific evidence that there's a heartbeat. A heartbeat is how you determine someone's alive. There's a heartbeat of the fetus. Therefore, that fetus has inalienable rights endowed with it by its creator, including the right to life. Therefore, you don't have the right to take it unless that baby is an imminent threat to the life or serious injury of the mother. Right. Similar with the with fetal pain. It's like, listen, if it's reacting to pain, it's alive. It's one of the ways, interesting, many frequently when paramedics are checking to see someone's alive, right? First thing you do, you take the pulse. The other thing they'll do is they'll knuckle and they'll grind it into the person's sternum because it hurts. And if someone's trying to fake it, they go, it'll wake them up, right? If they're unconscious, it'll often bring them around. So heartbeat and pain, that actually fulfills the requirements of Roe v. Wade to say, yes, states can regulate it because they've now shown that is a living human being inside the mother. It was the later cases that actually said, no, any reason, anytime, whatever. Those are the ones that really need to be overturned. But Mississippi is right, because the other than saying that, does the government have the right to be involved in a medical decision? No. Right? That the court was right saying that no. But we've mythologized so much of Roe v. Wade that we turn around and say the quote unquote right to abortion, those parts of Roe v. Wade, yes, they are a violation because the federal government was not given the authority to regulate that. That's not within their purview. Let's see. All right, Incredible. I'm a bit of an absolutist with the Constitution. So I believe the Second Amendment says we should be able to own any firearm. Given that, do you believe, as I do, that yelling fire in a crowded theater should be allowed under the First Amendment? Those are very good questions. I am also an absolutist. I believe in the original document, in the original words. Let me find the definition, because I'm using Webster's 1828 dictionary. Why? No, Webster was a contemporary of the founding fathers. In fact, he was asked to edit the Federalist Papers. So as he compiled his definitions, eventually he published it in a dictionary in 1828, and he defines an arm as weapons of offense or armor for defense and protection of the body. So an arm, make sure you get this. So when the Second Amendment says keep and bear arms, you're absolutely right. Firearms, swords, chemical sprays, hand grenades, basically anything you could reasonably carry, deal with in your hands. I would extend that to cannons, to mortars, to recoilless rifles, because these are arms of offense or armor for defense, right? So technically body armor would also fall under that. Now, yelling fire in a crowded theater. There is a myth about this yelling fire in a crowded theater. The Supreme Court never said yelling fire in a crowded theater was unconstitutional. Right? The Supreme Court never said that. There's a case called Schneck versus United States. Schneck was a guy that was trying to convince other people to dodge the draft. The Congress tried to have him arrested and punished. He sued and said, no, you don't have the right to infringe on my right I have a right to speak freely, including persuading others to avoid what I think is an illegal action by the government. In the opinion of Schneck, as an example of the limits of the First Amendment, or I should say the limits of freedom of speech, they said, listen, you cannot use your speech to intentionally violate the rights of another. For example, you cannot go into a theater and falsely cry fire because you are depriving others of their rights. It was an example of the extent of really any right. The idea that you can exercise a right up until the point you harm someone. So, I talk about this in my books. I talk about this in my classes. I do a class on what is a right, and I go into this in much more detail. The examples I also use are, you are not allowed to lie. Actually, let me something first. The point wasn't a prior restriction on action. It was, could you be punished for that action? Right. So it wasn't that you should be physically barred from entering a theater and crying fire. It's that if you do so, you could be held liable if you do so falsely. Right. So if I were to go down to a theater, just a second, Sean. If I were to go down to a theater and I see smoke and I walk into the theater and I yell fire, there's nothing wrong with that, right? I'm warning people the building is on fire. You should probably want to exit. On the other hand, if I decide I don't like what's being done in the theater, so to disrupt it, I walk in and falsely yell fire. I've deprived the attendees of the right to peaceably assemble. I've deprived the owner of his property because I'm taking away his use of the property and any proceeds from that. Therefore, they would both have right to sue me for damages because I've deprived them of their rights. And the example that everybody pretty much understands is, if you lie under oath in a court of law, it's called perjury. You go to jail for that. You cannot claim freedom of speech when it comes to lying under oath, because you are depriving the defendant or the prosecution, but more likely the defendant, of the right to a free and fair trial. So, it's absolutism is good as long as it's not focused on one specific part. It looks at the entire spectrum of your First Amendment freedoms. You are correct. You have every right to walk into a theater and yell fire. If you do so falsely, you will also be charged and punished for that. That is also correct. You cannot claim First Amendment protections for that type of action. Sean, go ahead.
I was just going to expound on if you go into a theater and yell fire and then there's a panic and somebody gets trampled, you're responsible for that and can be punished for it. And let's say the person died, that's manslaughter.
Absolutely. Yes. It's that was the whole point of Schneck, is that the First Amendment cannot be used as a defense against criminal activity. That was the example they were setting, because that was the argument that the government was making, was that he was inciting criminal activity, therefore he could be punished. And as an example, that Schneck used that, and it's been misinterpreted for decades. If you want to, where did I write an article on that? I know I've put it in my book, but I don't remember if I think I've done. I'd have to go find it. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. So that's that's one of those that it's a misinterpretation of a Supreme Court case. You're afraid. Barrett and Kavanaugh are afraid of public pressure. They lack fortitude. Thomas, Gorsuch, Alito called them out multiple times. Put it this way, Florida man, I'm pretty much a pox on all their houses. Hang on a second. Let me pull up. I want to pull up some articles I've done lately because I've been going through Supreme Court opinion because they release a bunch of opinions, end of June, early July. I asked California v. Texas. Where was it? No, that's the wrong one. To be honest, none of the justices have truly stood out at the end of this term. They have all shown themselves to be more wedded to an ideology and to precedent than to the actual Constitution. Why am I drawing a blank on the? Maybe it was a takings case. Maybe it was a takings case I was thinking of. Cedar Point versus Hasid. Let's see. Right. So Cedar Point versus Hasid. No, that wasn't it. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank off the top of my head, but in reviewing these, very often, even if the headline of the opinion that you always hear is reasonable, very often you look at the opinions of how they got there or why they dissented, and they're atrocious. Basically, was it the Cedar Point opinion, which dealt with did a California law that allowed unions to enter private property to stump for unionism, for seek members, was that a violation of the Constitution? Now the court found yes, it is, but the method they got there opened up so many. It's a Trojan horse to so many abuses of the power of governmental power, because they basically said, well, yeah, it's wrong, but they didn't do that's because they didn't do this one thing. I mean, the adoption in Philadelphia, right? They said, listen, it was unconstitutional for the city of Philadelphia to demand that all foster agencies place children with non-married or homosexual or single-sex married couples. The way they worded it, though, wasn't that simply, listen, you have a right to compete for business, and you can't be how they word. They didn't come out and say, listen, as a contractor to a public entity, the public entity cannot demand that you violate your conscience to do business with them. Right? They can't demand that you violate your religious beliefs. They did not say that. I know a lot of people reported that. What they said was, because the law says you have to place children in same-sex foster care or an unmarried foster care couples, but they allowed an arbitrary exception. The exception rested in the director's hands. It was an arbitrary decision. Therefore, it was not, how do they put it? It was not universally applied. Therefore, it's a violation of the First Amendment, which means all the city would have to do is say, nope, there's no more exceptions. And the city can now force you to either place children in same-sex couples or not be eligible for the contracts, right? The details matter, so that's what when I look at, I never had much hope for Kavanaugh. Gorsuch has been pretty good. Thomas is okay, except he almost always leans towards government power. If it's a government power, Thomas will almost always support it. Alito, meh. Barrett, I've been waiting. I wanted to give her a chance to kind of really get some opinions under her feet, not simply take one and make a decision. And so far, I've not been impressed. She is very wedded to precedent, to previous Supreme Court opinion. So, and Florida said, is it? Oh, well, Florida man, let me address that. I think I see where you're going. We have to understand that the federal government is designed to be a servant of the states, not its master. Second of all, the Supreme Court has no real power. They offer their opinion. They don't make rulings. They offer their opinion. Judicial power is merely the power to hear and offer opinions in cases related to the specifics in facts and law to the case in front of you. So this whole idea that Supreme Court rules, that the Supreme Court can overrule Congress, is hogwash. It's a lie. It's a lie made up by lawyers and judges who lied about the basis for it. So if you talk to lawyers and judges, you go to law school, they'll tell you that in the case Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court assumed the authority of judicial review. Well, I actually read the Marbury versus Madison opinion. The court said, yes, obviously we have the power of judicial review. If we're looking at a case, we must review both the law, including the Constitution, and the facts, and we must make our opinion based on all of that data. And the question is, if a law is in contradiction to the Constitution, which do we follow? And they go through a whole legal mumbo jumbo to come down and says, if the law is in contradiction to the Constitution, we have to follow the Constitution. It is the supreme law of the land. And in fact, all courts and all departments are bound to that document, to that instrument. So the idea of judicial review merely says when a case comes before the court needs to review the law in question, including the Constitution that may be impacted by that law. It does not say that they have the power to overturn an opinion of or a law that has been passed by Congress and signed by the president. That does not say they have the ability to overrule the two other branches, to rule over the two other branches the way we treat it today. And my favorite is Alexander Hamilton said they have no power over the sword or the honors of the nation. He concludes this with, they could say they have neither force nor will, only judgment. And that judgment is limited to the case in front of them. So technically, Mississippi has no reason to sue to overturn Roe v. Wade because Roe v. Wade only applies to Roe and Wade and no one else. Yes, Florida man, one level of checks and balances. Just one. And in fact, I'm going to be next month. I'm going up to Bismarck. I'm going to be at Freedom Fest, Midwest Freedom Fest. When is that? August. When is it? August 14th, Saturday, August 14th. I think it's going to be in Monacan Grove outside of Bismarck, North Dakota. And I've been asked to actually do a whole class. I'm going to speak for a whole hour on checks and balances because there is so much more to it than just just the three branches of government. Rem, I'm sorry to hear you didn't get your Zoom invite. if you registered at the last minute, you may not have been added to the sequence, but I haven't seen anybody at the last minute. What you can do, Rem, is contact me through the website, and I'll double check and make sure that you're actually on the right list to get those alerts that went out. Open a ticket. Well, actually, I don't have an account. I don't have tickets set up there. So just there's a support email form. Just fill that out. And Bobby. Oh,
my invites. I don't know where they're going. They always go to like a spam folder or somewhere. I always have to manually search before I can click on the Zoom link. So like today, I typed in Constitution Study and it said new mail received from Constitution Study, July 21st. So
interesting. So yeah, maybe Bobby, maybe it's hitting your spam folder. Maybe you need to whitelist me. I know there are lots of places that think what I do is spam. Okay. Where'd it go? There it is. I was just looking at a couple things. So let's see. Any more questions, guys? Where are we here? Home in New York. See now, Bobby, I want to. You know what? I was just thinking the other day. I have a friend up in Albany area that I was thinking about this morning, saying I wanted to reach out to her and see if I want to set something up in New York. I want if I do this Knowing Your Rights tour, I'd love to get up to the Northeast because I've got a lot of friends and stuff I would like to meet that I haven't seen in a while. And I know Bobby, you're up in New York, so I just don't have anybody up there that's putting anything together that'll actually get me up there. Let's see. I believe you're under Robert in here. I'm just taking real quick, see if anybody else has a question while I'm waiting. Okay. So yeah, any more questions? We got about 15 minutes left before I want to shut this thing down. And you are interesting. Let's see. I think I've got 2 emails for you, Bobby. I've got a Proton mail and I've got a Yahoo mail. And I know Yahoo doesn't like me. Yahoo has been giving me fits. Every so often they decide, you know what? We're just going to stop. We're just going to stop accepting mail. My wife has a friend who is on Yahoo, and Yahoo just bounces the messages. And it looks like it's your Yahoo account set up for the live stream. And my guess is Yahoo's playing dirty, which they do every so often. So here's what I'm going to do, Robert, just to make your life easy. I'm going to go in, I'm going to find your Proton mail account and add you to the list so you'll get them in the future. I've been trying to automate this list, and sadly, I'm really trying to get away from a lot of these, service, software as a service type things where, you pay a monthly fee and use their services, because they keep messing with me. And, I just got tired of spending a lot of money. But the problem is the services that I can run on my own website, not as advanced. And there's a couple things I'd like to do that just doesn't let me do. And one of the things that's not good is I want to, none of the schedulers understands that I have 2 sessions a month. If I do it once a week, no problem. If I do it every other week, no problem. If I do it the 2nd and 4th Thursday of the month, they don't understand. So that's been an interesting problem. All right, so that's updated. So let's see what else we got in here. So yeah, hopefully, Rem, you'll be loaded to the next one. Just so everybody knows, by the way, Let's see, today is what? Today is the 22nd. So the August 5th event, the August 5th, no, sorry, August 12th live stream, which will be our next live stream. I'm trying to actually set up, I'm going to be doing my Knowing Your Rights tour. I'm going to be in Grand Forks, North Dakota. I'm trying to set it up so I'll actually do the live stream, the Q&A portion from the Knowing Your Rights tour. So hold on to your hats. Next time may be a little funky, but we start at 6, and I'm going to be doing my Knowing Your Rights tour for about an hour. And then at 7, when you guys, when I finish that up, I'll open the live stream. Hopefully I'll have the live stream up and running, and you can join however many people I have in Grand Forks, North Dakota. We'll have our Q&A with a live audience. So it's an experiment. I'm going to try it. I hope it works. What helps you stay disciplined while studying the Constitution? Maybe dry to read for many people. And I'm assuming is that Kainoa. I don't like this. I try to pronounce people's names properly. What makes you disciplined? Well, a lot of it started with passion. I spent most of my life, when it came to the Constitution, ignorant and apathetic. I didn't know. I didn't care. I went to public school, 1776, and constitutions for lawyers and judges, and it doesn't matter. When I was listening to, I was probably in my 40s before I actually heard a historian that didn't put me to sleep. So I heard this guy talking about history, talking about American history. I started listening to him. He quoted John Jay. John Jay said, every member of the state ought diligently to read and study the Constitution of his country and teach a rising generation to be free. By knowing their rights, they'll sooner perceive when they're violated and be the better prepared to defend and assert them. I know Sean's heard this a dozen times already, right? I took it as a challenge and I read the Constitution. When I did so, a couple things I noticed. One is how much I had not been taught about the Constitution. The Constitution is, to me, the Constitution is dry until you put it into your own context. Right? So, let's take an example here. Let me find something. Let me pick something here. Okay. Let's pick the Constitution. So the first thing was how much I hadn't been taught. The second thing was how much what I had been taught was absolutely wrong. So, for example, when I read the preamble, right? We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and preserve the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution. If that's all I do, if I just read the words, it's dry. So what I did is, what really got me is when I started working on my book, is I broke it down. We the people. Well, if we the people establish this Constitution, which creates the federal government, that means we created the federal government. That means we rule the federal government. We're its masters, not its slaves, in order to form a more perfect union. Well, what was wrong with the union that was before this one? The one under the Articles of Confederation. So I looked at that a little bit. Establish justice, not racial justice, economic justice, social justice, climate justice, just plain justice. Ensure domestic tranquility. Okay, how do we keep from fighting among the states? Think about it. When was the last time you had countries in close proximity that didn't fight amongst each other? Just look at the history of Europe. Makes sense. Provide for the common defense. Again, 13 small countries, you band together, you're a lot stronger. Promote the general welfare. That's a whole other set of questions, right? But when I got to securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, I realized the purpose of the Constitution is so that I am the posterity of the founding fathers, so that I would enjoy the blessings of liberty. Furthermore, my daughter is my posterity. What are we going to do to help to secure the blessings of liberty? What can I do to help secure the blessing of liberty to her? So if I am the master, if I, as part of the people, help create the federal government, and one of its major purposes to secure the blessings of liberty, major purpose of Constitution, now it becomes personal. So when I read it, when I speak in front of events, especially when I speak in front of young people, I read the preamble, I recite the preamble differently. We the people, we're in charge, we're the masters. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, make it better, establish justice so you can have justice regardless of your race, color, creed, sex. Ensure domestic tranquility so that we're not fighting with each other like we are all the time today. Provide for a common defense so that we're not invaded. Promote the general welfare so that we all have a fair chance at things. And most importantly, to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. That is why we ordain and establish this Constitution. It becomes personal. It helps make it less dry. So what I ended up my modus operandi, I guess, is I took each clause, I read it, I thought about it, I tried to put it in my own terms, in my own context. What does this mean today? If there was a term that I wasn't sure of, I went back and looked it up in the 1828 dictionary so that I put the whole thing into my context. And I think by doing that, it was no longer ink on parchment. It was the ideas behind the ink on parchment. And when I get to the things like securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, and I think about my daughter, I mean, obviously, that's personal, right? To me, to you, my daughter is just a person. To me, she's my daughter, right? She had a bunch of friends over this past weekend for a cookout, and she would not let me wear my Dad's Against Daughters Dating shirt. I have a shirt my wife got me. It says, Dad's Against Daughters Dating. Shoot the first one. It acts as a deterrent. Right? Wouldn't let me wear that shirt. Why? She's my daughter. She's special. And I want to secure the blessings of liberty for her and eventually for her children. And when it becomes personal, rather than looked at as just a document you're reciting, then I think that's what makes a difference. I think that is why the discipline was less necessary once it became personal. Once I realized that this impacted me, it impacted my family, my wife, my daughter, my father, my stepmom, my sister, cousins, aunts, uncles, they're all impacted by this. And when when it got to that point, that's to me when it became a joy to learn I'm not a subject of government. I am its master. I am not the subject of Joe Biden or Dr. Fauci or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I am their master. They work for us. And then the question is, okay, I want to study this because I want to be able to stand and prove that. I had a great comment several months ago. I have asked for permission to get names and to use it. I was never given permission, so I can only give you the highlights. A lady commented back when I was still on Facebook. Her husband sued a couple of county officials, and in court, he won the case and was told by the judge because he knew the law. He knew the Constitution of the United States and of his states. And he was encouraged to do that by listening to me. And that is personal. I want the not just the arms of firepower, but the arms of knowledge to defend myself against the tyranny that is present today. Go right back to the beginning. right? With Australia being a penal colony, with the door-to-door knocking, with the potential of vaccine mandates. When this COVID nonsense started, and I had an event in a neighboring county that just implemented a mask mandate, when I was told, well, we should be okay, but we don't know what the police are going to do. I said, I don't care. The mask mandate's illegal. It's void. It's meaningless. The coordinator said, when I explained it to her, when I showed her the goods, she said, hey, if the police show up, we're sending them to your table. That's why it's important. Because by knowing the Constitution, I could defend myself in public. So hopefully, again, Kanoa, I'm sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing your name, but that was an excellent question. Thank you for letting me rant for a little bit. Florida Man, I agree. They were envisioning a limited government. The other thing they were envisioning, and I haven't found a good quote for this yet. I keep looking for it. The idea that the three branches of government would jealously guard their power, which they've given up. But then again, they also assumed that the states would jealously guard their power, and they've given that up too. So, it's a sad state of affairs, but rarely do republics last more than 200 to 300 years. And, if we're going to let now, well, the U.S. Constitution is the second oldest constitution in the world. The only constitution older than the U.S. Constitution is the Massachusetts Constitution. So we've already broken the trend. The question is, as Mr. Franklin said, can we keep it? Yeah, they won't care about limited government. Well, it's less they care about limited government. It's what unlimited government can do. Who was it that said capitalism is the worst form of economics in the world except for all the others? I want to say Winston Churchill said something along that line. It's like it's the worst in the world except for all the rest. But you're right. Sadly, most people don't know what they're missing until they've lost it. And or put another way, those who refuse to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Santayana, what are you going to say? What are you going to do? All right. Well, we're getting down to the bottom of the hour. We seem to have kind of come into a nice soft landing here. I want to thank everybody for showing up. Please share this. Hopefully, Bobby, you'll get your link next time. I love when people show up on the Zoom because, as you can see, we get these nice face-to-face communications. I like them quite a bit. Next time, I am going to be up in North Dakota, so hopefully we'll do that. I'm hoping to meet some of you people. Please, if you can put anything together, doesn't need to be big. If we can get something together that I can come out and talk to a group of people. I think this idea of knowing your rights, the passion, the passion comes from understanding its importance, from understanding that we have rights and freedoms and liberty because we defend them. The Constitution doesn't protect your rights. It is the legal method by which you're allowed to protect them for yourself. And it's, I'm passionate about coming out and speaking to people. I do not charge to come out and speak to people. Most of the places I'm going to so far have offered a hotel room for me, but I'm basically putting this out there. And I'm hoping that I get donations and sell books and stuff to help pay for all of this. But I don't need to have a big group. I've got one that got a bunch of homeschoolers getting together. I got another we're meeting in the back of a bakery. I got one we're meeting in an American Legion hall, and people are coming in. If we can make it happen, we'll see what we can do about I'll do what I can to make it happen. But I really need you to help me spread the word about this, to let other people know about the Constitution study, the scholars, invite them to a live Q&A. I'm on the radio. I'm on America Out Loud Radio 5 days a week, and I'm trying to get people to pay attention. But it's one thing. See, if I ask, then people say, "Well, you know, it's him. He's doing it." But if you tell somebody, "Hey, you know, I heard this guy," that makes a bigger difference. So, unless someone has something else, I guess we'll wrap it up for the day. Thanks everybody for showing up. Looks like that's it. We're gone. Thanks. I'll see you from hopefully sunny North Dakota. Have a great night, everyone.
Take care.